Hello, everyone, and welcome to what I am going to call TeleTalk with Tracy. And overwhelmingly, your questions to me have been about the nuts and bolts of making telepractice work. And so that's what this series is about. I am Perry Flynn, the consultant to the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction in the area of speech language pathology. And my guest is going to be Tracy Ball. We'll get to him in a minute. But first, I want to acknowledge that all of you and all of us are working under tremendously pressurized conditions. And your trajectory of learning is like no other right now. So I want to acknowledge that, and you are managing many things, providing teleservices from home while you're trying to homeschool your own children, and with pets walking through the picture, and my cat is close at hand, so that may be happening here too. All kinds of new challenges for you, matching your face mask to your wardrobe for the day to go out for your once a week grocery shopping. Just like I am, I only have one face mask, so if you see me in the grocery store, I very well may be clashing. So I also want to acknowledge that some of you are part-time first responders, and we are so appreciative of our first responders who are in the line of fire every day, taking care of the people who have been infected with COVID. And I also want to acknowledge that some of you are worrying about parents or other friends or loved ones who have been infected and who might be living in skilled nursing facilities, and that too is a tremendous new burden on you. So I am cognizant of all those things, and we wish everyone the best in these oddest of times. So, as I said earlier, the point of the TeleTalks with Tracy is to provide you with some really real world, very practical ideas on how to accomplish this new kind of service delivery that we're all engaged in, myself included. Part of what I do for the University of North Carolina at Greensboro is supervise graduate students doing their clinical practicum. And we have begun to serve a classroom of students with intellectual disabilities, all of whom are at home, who would have been at an equestrian therapy program before, but equestrian therapy is difficult to provide through telepractice, so that's not happening. But so I can and will chime in with some real life experiences of my own that I've run across in the last few weeks. So let's get on to Tracy. Tracy Ball is my guest. He is a good friend of mine. He was my graduate assistant when he was in college at UNCG, and we have remained close friends ever since. That's been a while ago now. Tracy, you're getting old.
Yeah.
But Tracy's had a variety of experiences. He worked as a speech language pathologist in the schools and has struck out on his own into private practice, served a variety of settings, but currently he is engaged in telepractice. Almost completely, his service delivery is through telepractice. And he works for a firm, Enable My Child, and that firm provides services to patients, clients, and students in LEAs in North Carolina and other states as well. So Tracy, thank you so much for lending your time and experience. I consider you a guru of telepractice, and so we're going to pick your brain here for a few minutes.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So anything you want to say to get started, or should I jump in with the questions?
Yeah. Well, I have a 5 and a 7-year-old, and so I'm currently navigating the scenario like many other people. I don't have any pets, so you won't see a cat crawling behind me, but you might see my 5-year-old. Hopefully not. It's been interesting to to witness this and be a part of this, because I actually feel like I'm pretty lucky, because I can do my job remotely. And so all the first responders, people that can't do their jobs remotely, or people that may have lost their jobs because of this, I think it's really important for everybody to kind of acknowledge that and understand that, we are lucky if we can do our jobs remotely. And so those of us that are listening that can and will be able to do this job remotely, I think it's really important for us to try to make the best of it, because we're actually going to be moving the profession forward faster than otherwise would have been, with this overnight shift into being digital because of COVID. And so I'm just really excited to share what I've learned, and hopefully gather what other people have learned and try to share that through this medium as well. So I appreciate the opportunity to do this with you, Perry. And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting started.
Yeah, you make a good point, Tracy. We are so lucky. I feel so lucky to have a job and be able to do it. Not only a job, but a job I love,
Mm-hmm.
and that keeps life interesting every day. And I am really trying to embrace the new skills. I'm enjoying actually working from home, and my cats are really enjoying me being home all the time as well. And yeah, so lucky to have a job, especially a job that I really love. So
Mm-hmm.
let's jump into the questions. When you first began providing services through telepractice and you were anticipating doing that, what concerns did you have? What fears? What concerns? Tell us about those.
So I like technology and I like change. I always kind of make side jokes that my ADHD brain likes to change things up every once in a while. And so for me, I didn't have any direct concerns because I knew it would work well. And it didn't have to be the only tool in the toolbox. It could be used as an additional tool to our toolbox as a therapist. And so I didn't have that concern. Now, from a programmatic level, there's concerns about how you implement a new workflow into an existing system. And so I think that's where a lot of people have concerns. How do I move into using a digital format, and what does that mean for my job, and how do I reflect that I'm doing a good job in this new format? So I think that's one thing that probably a lot of people have to think about, not just therapists, but maybe program directors and such. And so I like to try to understand how other people feel about this, because I honestly didn't have a lot of concerns about when I started telehealth. I just thought it was a really great way to help increase access for people that didn't have access, and maybe provide more services to some of the neediest populations.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. Lots of our people are really perfectionists, and so they, worry and anticipate every little thing that could go wrong. And it is very different, and especially entering people's homes. And I know that we'll talk about that in a bit, but and it's not maybe going to look as pre-planned and perfect as face-to-face sessions might look, but I hope people can sort of let go of that anxiety and need for perfection, and just really operate in the best interest of kids. That really are our paramount concern right now. Whether you're providing direct services or talking with parents as a coach, or providing packets of work that are communication kinds of activities, that just operating in the best interest of kids, no matter
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing, is really our paramount concern.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Brings up two things to my mind before we move on. One
Sure.
is we talked about the Saturday Night Live skits and how they use a very informal, down to earth, low budget. People are using their iPhones and they're using very cheap equipment,
Right.
and they're a multi-million-dollar operation, but it brings a little bit of levity to the situation because
Sure.
they're all in the same situation that we are. So we don't have to project onto, the people that we work with, I think it actually allows us to be more effective because we can build a more tight bond with them. And there's actually a book about this from Zev Newworth, who lives here in Charlotte and works at Atrium Health, called Reframing Healthcare. And it talks about how you can be more customer centric, and we can, kind of have a larger set of skills that are not necessarily clinical in nature, but more empathetic, delivering a customized experience that, moves us away from the patient mindset and really helps us understand people at the root of who they are as a person and not as a patient.
Yeah, we are now entering people's homes on a
Right.
daily basis
Right.
that we wouldn't have done before, and that provides some challenges, perhaps,
Mm-hmm.
but it provides some amazing opportunities to make connections with parents and do some parent coaching. The
Mm-hmm.
parents are living with those kids, 24/7 these days. And so building communication opportunities into their daily routine might be some of the best things that we are able to do for people.
That's right. And before I went into early intervention, I actually did a fair amount of home visits when I worked in the school system for homebound students. And so, doing that does prepare you for a different set of challenges when you're working, because you have to really be able to teach the families how to generalize these strategies into a real life environment that they're going to be in all day, every day. So.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier too the platforms that people are using, and the North Carolina Board of Examiners in Speech Language Pathology right now, here at the end of April, has relaxed the HIPAA and FERPA requirements. But I would like to guide all of you back to your LEAs, back to your directors of exceptional children, to problem solve around what networks you will use and what platforms you will use if you are providing direct services.
Yeah, because that will change.
Yeah.
So those relaxed regulations eventually will change.
Right. It will change over time. And the Department of Public Instruction is trying to provide as much guidance for you as we can. And you will find all of the speech-specific guidance on my website. If you just Google search my name, Perry, Perry, Flynn, Flynn, first thing that comes up is the website. And right below my biography is the COVID section. So you'll find much guidance there on really every question we can really think of to help you out with. So, so Tracy, moving on to the next question, tell us about how planning for providing services virtually might differ from planning for face-to-face service delivery.
Well, so like I said earlier, my background working in schools and early intervention, really gave me a pretty strong foundation of coaching, whether I was coaching a teacher on strategies in the classroom, or a parent that I was working with homebound, or a family that I was working with through early intervention. I've done all of those things directly and remotely.
Or coaching T-ball too.
Right. Coaching T-ball, coaching basketball, whatever the sport may be as well.
Or 5-year-olds.
Yeah, which is a unique skill. It involves a lot of patience. But I think that the crux of it is, can we build rapport and communicate effectively, and involving people in the plan and the treatment and the feedback related to the goals and the strategies. It's extremely important that there's a cyclical feedback loop where you're not only providing your expertise, but you're asking for real feedback, whether you like it or not. It may not be good feedback for you. It may be critical, but I think communication and feedback and empathy will allow us to make better strategies, implement more robust skills for that family, and ultimately they'll follow it more. And so I've seen that when I have a hard time communicating with a family or connecting with a family, I just feel like the progress many times doesn't meet my expectations, and I know it probably doesn't meet the family's expectations. So we're not all perfect, but I think that's what to strive for. Obviously, I've had struggles with that too.
Okay. So your point about the family really hit home for me. I think one of the planning mistakes that I made was that the teacher of the class, set everything up, set the platform up, invited the parents and stuff. But I should have been in communication with the parents to let them know, what this was going to look like, what our expectations were. And they were so good, they caught on really quickly and were able to be great facilitators. But it would have gone better had I done like a parent facilitator training session, even for like 10 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
before we actually got started with to get the augmented communication device up and running, before we turned on the camera, to have the volume of the device up a little bit so that it would be easier to get. I mean, some just really simple things. So I have learned that to just really maybe have a brief parent training session about how to
Yes.
be a better facilitator, might have worked really well for
Yes.
before that first session.
I agree. There's a paradigm. There's a technology acceptance model, TAM, and it is basically um, the more acceptance you get on a technology front, the more understanding of procedures and process that a client or a family or student may have, then the better they're able to absorb and utilize the information. So you're spot on. If you can do that up front and put in the work up front, you're going to get a lot more out of the actual therapy and the treatments and the sessions.
Yeah, sure. And if you out there are looking for like a kind of training paradigm for facilitators, ASHA has that on their website, and that is linked in one of the question and answer documents that is on my website, in the question and answer document in the COVID section, because that was a frequent question. So as a clinician, Tracy, do you feel like you did anything different in planning, not the technology kind of planning now, but the actual speech therapy sessions planning? Do you feel like you did anything different?
Honestly, I feel like I tried harder to provide resources that the families could use because I couldn't be there in person, and maybe I lied on the first question. Um maybe that was my
Your
concern,
biggest
was that
concern?
not being there in person. I did try to compensate for that by being a little more prepared with some resources, whether it was books, parent guides, websites, um, actual things that they would be able to use and modify that they may just not think of because they've not thought of it in that light before. But ultimately, it's a mix of planning, and I do that by sort of a day, week, month, quarter breakdown, and then there's also who you're including. As an IEP team, you really need to include the entire team in the planning process, because a lot of times I noticed I would get feedback from other professionals that parents would tell them that maybe they didn't tell me, or vice versa. You could be very helpful to other people because maybe your rapport is different with the family than another therapist or a teacher. So from that perspective, it's a mix, right, of really diligent communication and a little bit more adoption of resource and building of the family's competencies in sort of the skills that you're trying to teach.
Okay, great. And so you've talked about resources, and again, on my website, there's a self-care kind of section in one of the question and answer documents that talks about some self-care. But some of those tips, there are many resources. There are two DPI websites about virtual learning, one from the Exceptional Children's Department and one from General Education on my website. Both of those have resources for um, all kinds of different things, virtual museum tours. For me, I put on virtual horse farm tours in Lexington, Kentucky. There are yoga activities for kids at home, and one fantastic resource might be that you turn parents on to those kinds of resources, because they are living with their kids 24/7. They would love to have, maybe some yoga activities to do, and then you could build some communication in to comprehending the instructions that go along with yoga, and then talking about the poses and stuff like that. Like, all of those kinds of things lend themselves well to communication activities past the time that you might or might not be providing direct services to kids.
Yep.
So talking about those virtual museum tours, or all that kind of stuff. And again, it's on my website, but it's all over the web these days, those kinds of virtual museum tours and things like that. So we sort of have just talked about it, but did you have any specific resources that you use that might be particularly helpful to our audience?
So I've always tried to avoid collecting too many resources, because if they're my resources, they're not the family's, and the family's not going to be able to use that when I'm not there. But the resources I do collect, I like to try to collect more programmatic, structured resources that I feel like may be unique, that the family may not have access to, that I could then recreate for them, whether it would be, a week or two at a time, like, sending them screenshots or printing them off for them, and allowing them to kind of work through a structured program, in segments, kind of while I'm walking them through that. Whether it be like a hand-in program for early intervention, or like a language curriculum in, the schools, or something that would be a little bit more structured that the family may have to come out of pocket for. And instead I could buy the license and the resources as a therapist, and then disseminate to my clients, legally, without having to break any law, obviously, and do something a little bit different with them, but then teach them how to use that in everyday activities. So they're taking the skills, not only that they're teaching their child, but how to teach their child. And they could do that when they're reading books with them at the end of the night, or they're having them write a journal activity during the day. That may not be the exact strategy that we talked about in the moment, but they could take that and generalize it. So, resources to me are a little bit family specific. So if it's not something really structured that I feel like I can bring and add a lot of value to, I really want to ask them, what do you like to do? What do you want to do? They may have ideas, and they just may not know how to get it going. And so we may be able to help problem solve that. And I could give them homework that may give them the push to do that. And having some of the follow up, would be really important, to complete that. So I like to try to put as much on the family and the student as possible, but I also want to be able to provide structure so that it's completed.
Yeah, such a great point. This kind of service delivery offers us the opportunity to much more collaborate with parents, and
Mm-hmm.
much more find out what their needs are, and what kind of materials that they have in their home that we can give them some activities to play off of.
And that could work in reverse if you're working with a teacher, actually, because you may need to ask the teacher, okay, tell me what you are doing with this student, so I can provide the strategies and adopt the methods that we're using, so that they can do better. If you're a related service provider, my job is to help them access that curriculum that they're being taught. So if I need to reverse that, if I need to go to the teacher and say, okay, what are you teaching? Let's work together so I can provide more strategies that allows this student to thrive in this environment, then that's the answer there.
Yeah, you just read my mind on that one. That was the next place I was going to go. Was this also provides an opportunity to collaborate with teachers? Hopefully people have been collaborating with teachers in the face-to-face brick and mortar
Right.
situation of schools. But if not, you can find out from teachers what kinds of work packets they have already sent home, and plan your activities off of that. And in all honesty, that takes some of the burden off of you of coming up with materials and media to provide our services. Teachers are already sending that stuff home. So you might ask them to copy you in on, or give you access to
Yep.
those kinds of
Yeah.
work packets or media that are being sent home.
Yeah, as a parent, we get a lot of resources from the teacher and the school, and some of them, when they're given in a manner that's structured, and I have a system by which to monitor, track, and complete them, it's really good. But when they're just throwing resources at us, and there's not a lot of instruction and not a lot of engagement, that's not always helpful, to
Yeah.
be honest. And
Okay.
so we have to be aware as we're working with parents and teachers, are we so excited to give people resources that we're not really able to implement it with them? Because a
Yeah.
lot of times if we're just throwing stuff at people, they may or may not be able to absorb it. So
Sure, an excellent point there. So to not just send the resources, but how to use the resources, how to make them communication rich resources, engagement, again, engagement with parents, that seems to keep coming up for us, engagement with parents about how to do this. Yeah, such a great idea. We haven't mentioned this, but Tracy and I have talked about that this hopefully will not be a one-shot deal, that this is sort of an overview of TeleTalk with Tracy, but we hope to keep these going on and perhaps create a YouTube channel that will house them and be very much more specific and topical in the future ones about particular things. And we also had talked about doing like one therapy activity or giving you some therapy activity ideas at the end. We won't do that today, but hopefully if these continue in the future, we'll try and provide you with some ideas that of course you can take or leave as you choose. But
yeah.
I love to continue to provide therapy ideas. I love being a clinician still. So, and I know Tracy does too. So we'll help to boost your arsenal of therapy ideas in future episodes of TeleTalk with Tracy.
Yeah, and hopefully we can also add a few subject experts along the way, other than Perry and myself, and that would also enrich the conversation and sort of help people see what's going on with other professionals who may be operating at the top of their license or maybe crossing over into new areas that are a little bit more innovative.
Yeah, fantastic. We hope that we'll be able to do that. So tell us about getting right to the real nuts and bolts. What did you do in a therapy session? Tell us about the practicality of what do you do in a therapy session.
So as it relates to doing therapy in general, my first goal is to make sure that everybody in the session or related to the session knows what the purpose of the session is. So typically there's a little bit of communication beforehand, and there's typically been laid out a structure to the session. So there's some sort of review and intake of kind of where we are since the last time we met, kind of preliminary information in the beginning. Then we talk about what's important now and what are we going to use, what strategies, what content, what are we going to access now. And then we do the work. And then once we've done the work, we review the work. And this is obviously different levels for different people. If it's family coaching, if it's you're working with a 4-year-old, if it's a family, if it's a teacher, you obviously adjust. But and then the last step would be, we need to create a plan for what we're going to do from now until the next time we meet. And so that cyclical, type of environment really provides parents and students and teachers with structure so that they don't have to guess what's going to happen. They just need to make sure that we just need to change the content of the actual session, because the structure of the session is pretty much the same. We just will change and adopt and add new as they make progress, more information and different information. But generally speaking, that's how I like to run my therapy sessions, no matter the environment, no matter the population. That's a pretty standard coaching style session, but it works across the board.
Great. So I'll tell you one thing that I really learned about the structure of the session is that we assigned an order. The classroom that we are serving has several kids, several students in it. And right up front, we assign today's order is going to be student number one, then student number two, then student number three. And we'll switch that order up, as each session goes on. But that really helped everyone know and be prepared for whose turn would be next. And I just really liked that I am not usually that structured. Whoever wants to go first or whatever. But we were that structured, and I'm so happy that we were that structured. That really helped the parents have the kids prepared for their response. And we also gave them just a few seconds of planning time where they could plan their response at home and then go in that order to tell whatever the goal was, the goal of the communication activity. That worked really well.
One of the good tips that you just gave there also could be utilized with the chat window. So the chat windows are really helpful because that way you don't get multiple people talking over each other if in the session, if you have a group. So chat windows are extremely helpful. And then you can also copy and paste information into your notes from the chat window, which is a good trick.
Yeah. Okay. Great tip there. So tell us what lessons you learned, good or bad, that you'd like to pass on to people.
I think the biggest lesson I learned is something I shared earlier, where without building rapport, without giving the parents a really clear understanding of how does this work in a digital environment, without doing that, you're gonna lose some of your parents. And some parents are very savvy and they can just hop right in and they get it, and that's great. But the lesson I learned definitely is that you almost want to have this pre-meeting meeting that allows the parents to ask questions about what's going on. How are we going to do this? What does this look like? Do I need to be in front of, does my son or my child need to be in front of the camera? How are they going to pay attention in front of a screen? So they don't helping them understand, this is a different environment. It's not about just sitting a child or a student in front of a screen. We're really trying to enable a little bit more change throughout the day. So some of this will be, broken into parts. And so those parts may be your child on the screen. Some, it may be you. It may be that you're a fly on the wall. And you're watching an interaction with the family, and then you're going to give that family feedback. So really, part of it is learning how to talk to the families and describe this, because that's sometimes a challenge. And some people don't buy in, and that's hard. But I think maintaining the consistency of I know this isn't easy, and maybe getting people comfortable with it a little bit at a time was something that I struggled with. Is I just wanted people to just get it, this is just the way you do it. And so I think one thing I struggled with is maybe getting little pieces at a time. And I do better with this now. But if they really aren't able to commit at first, then how do you break this down into steps that does make it easier for a parent? We can get into that later, but those are some challenges for sure, and some lessons that I learned.
Okay, great lessons. Yeah, I can see the parents that I have been working with have been fantastic. They have been just the right amount of help. But I know, some people have struggled with parents who haven't been enough help or have been too much help. And so I do think that parent or caregiver coaching session at the beginning was something that I would have liked to have done differently. We keep coming back to that, but super important to help parents know our expectations and have them share their expectations and their concerns and questions. Much of what we are here for is to be a support network for parents that are, at home with their kids 24/7.
Sure. And remember, I've been doing this for 3 years. But when I started doing this, parents had a choice most of the time. Yeah. And when they didn't, it was because there were no providers or teachers or educators or therapists in the area. So they were kind of being forced into this. And so, not forced in a sense of maybe being made, but they didn't have any other choices. And so there was some hesitancy there. So that's something to actually consider looking ahead is when, social distancing and COVID is, not in, the environment anymore. How are people going to interact? I think there's going to be a lot of lessons that we're going to learn now that are going to help us in the future. We're going to continue with, but it is a consideration when people have more options. I think using telehealth once again as a tool in the toolbox is the way to look at this, and it doesn't have to be all or nothing or black or white. It's not a binary choice. It is, I'm a therapist and I have multiple ways to reach my clients and my customers and my families, my students. And so this is one of them. And I hope that the policies in North Carolina and other states will continue to kind of facilitate a more dynamic, more innovative, environment for everybody to learn and educate. So.
Yeah, you make a good point that now we've added this tool to our toolbox. We were sort of forced to create this tool and get it in the toolbox in a super short period of time. But I do think it's going to really rocket the profession forward, and service delivery across all settings, not just school settings, but healthcare and medi settings. It's rocketing forward delivery of higher education as well. So
yeah, it's definitely going to change the trajectory of how students learn, for sure.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. We've sort of talked about this, but any more to talk about the challenges or do's and don'ts that you've experienced?
There's obvious challenges, poor technology, no access to internet, poor adoption of technology. So maybe families may have technology, but they don't know how to use it. I think people are getting better at making technology easier to use, where you've got seamless logins, where there may be one click or even no click logins with fingerprints. My computer, I just put my finger on the little scanner and it opens and it gives passwords. And so there's all these seamless interactions that are going to continue to get better. Your iPhone, you just look at it, so as we move forward, some of these barriers are going to be removed. So hopefully, security is really one that we need to consider, because how much security do we need? I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know what the right mix of access and security is, but I do think that's something that is going to be debated and discussed. And as HIPAA regulations are pulled back and then return to normal. Who knows if it goes back and forth? Like if we have a second wave of COVID, are they going to relax them again so we can push out more services again if we have to? I don't know, but it seems like we have some levers to pull there that will improve access and bring more value to people who need them the most.
Yeah. Okay, great. You want to contrast the benefits and drawbacks of this kind of service delivery for people?
So obviously the benefits are for both, providers as well as therapists. If you're traveling around, going on into homes, now you're not putting yourself at risk driving around on roads. You're not putting families at risk bringing germs into their home if their children are immunocompromised. I've definitely worked with families like that were, that were required to receive services at home because they weren't allowed in a school because their child couldn't attend. And so those are benefits for everyone. There's cost benefits to certain programs. There's also downsides. Some people may not be able to build the rapport that they would need to build otherwise. It may be problematic for certain types of services. I know I've been speaking with some AUG-COM specialists and probably going to do some podcasts with them because there's a lot of discussion. Really treat a family that has high tech AAC needs at home, and even low tech. There's not a lot being done on that, I don't feel like, right now. No, I could be wrong, but I think that's an area where we have a unique challenge to really provide a high level service to a family that normally would be getting that in the schools. But it's unique because we actually have an opportunity to teach the family how to use it more at home than they may have gotten anyway in the school, because that therapist may be teaching the teacher and the student at school, but maybe that wasn't generalizing home. So you could turn some of these challenges into pros here. These cons could be turned into pros if we do it right. So I think we do have a unique opportunity to kind of put ourselves out there and put our best foot forward.
Yeah, there is research that suggests that telepractice is a preferable means of delivering services for certain populations of kids, even over face-to-face live delivery. So there are some benefits. There are certainly some drawbacks. There are some students that are not candidates for this kind of service delivery, and LEAs will deal with those on a case-by-case basis in their district. So we've talked so much about parents. Parents are such an integral, important, make or break kind of entity in this whole kind of service delivery, or whoever is facilitating the session. It might be grandparents, as parents, some parents are out working. It might even be some older siblings. So we've talked a lot about parents, but I don't know if we need to talk more. We've talked about them as facilitators. That was my next
We
question.
haven't talked about communication with the organization that the therapist may be working with, right? So there's another prong here. So unless you're a private practice or a single sole therapist, sole entity, but most of us are working with an organization. And so I think communication with the family and the organization and the therapist, and really, if that organization could include the IEP team possibly, or it could be separate. But I think if all three prongs are in sync with technology, with the procedures that are happening, scheduling, and there's an understanding clinically and educationally that we're all moving in the same direction, I think the likelihood that this will be successful will be dramatically increased.
Absolutely. And we have really encouraged all the related service providers, occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech language pathologists, school psychologists, everyone to not act as lone rangers unto themselves, but to really look to the LEA and their leadership within the LEA, likely the director of exceptional children, in making all of these decisions.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of times there's fear for something new, and especially if it involves privacy and HIPAA and potential licensure ramifications. We're really taught as young professionals and graduate students, to fear that hand and not overstep and operate in your lane. And so I think letting people know, like, this is how other therapists do it, other programs, other schools, other states. I think the more we're able to bring this into mainstream and make it normalized, and at the end of the day, it's just therapy. It's just educating students. It's working with families. That's what it is. We may not be calling this telepractice or teletherapy in another few years. It's just therapy. And so I think the more we can normalize this, the better.
It is a way to act in the best interest of kids in an odd time. Okay, so I feel like we've sort of come close to the conclusion here. Do you have any parting thoughts for us that you'd like to say before we wrap up?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to the upcoming episodes where we can dig into some more details on specific topics. And so I would like to respect the ecosystem that we're all working in, and make sure that, people know that we want feedback and we want to understand exactly what the questions are and what the concerns are from people that are in the field doing work every day, day in, day out. Because at the end of this, we want to make sure that we're providing an opportunity. We have a little bit of a platform here to, expand on and help people, get out there and feel comfortable doing this. And so it's really important that we use this opportunity of sort of this COVID-19 to force us and make real change and make real innovation move, a little bit further than it would have been maybe otherwise. So I think we should just take this as an opportunity and come together and improve and innovate. And, maybe we could do some things that puts North Carolina on the map a little bit, because we're a little behind when it comes to health outcomes and digital health transformation. So I would like to see that.
Great, thanks. So I'll wind us up here by saying once again that I acknowledge that you are doing an amazing job with retooling service delivery in such short order. And again, acknowledge that we are staying at home and supporting our first responders and taking care of family members and loved ones and just other residents around us who are experiencing the COVID virus. And so I'll thank Tracy certainly for lending your time to our effort here, and looking forward to continuing on a more specifically topical basis. And so I wish all of you safety at home and good mental and physical health and ample supplies of toilet paper. So thank you for joining us, and take care.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Perry.